Hi, my name is Dave Bodie for Tuts Plus, and thanks so much for checking out this video. So we're going to be taking a look at a little piece of music here that I put together. It's an orchestral composition with pretty standard orchestral instrumentation, and it has a very Christmassy feel. And I wanted to share this with you because recently I worked on a few tracks for a few Christmas ads that were set to air around Christmas time here in the United States. And I had a lot of fun putting them together, and so I wanted to share some of the ideas that went into creating those tracks. And so we're not going to actually look at the tracks that I created for those ads. Perhaps you may see them sometime, but they've been handed off to a music placement service. So I've created some different orchestral Christmas music here that has the same kind of feel. And we're going to take a look at kind of what goes into this and some of the ideas that make this Christmassy. Now, when we're talking about Christmas music, I think that there's a couple of things that make something sound Christmassy. For one, bells. You can add bells to just about anything, and it instantly just sounds Christmassy, because I've been lots of other places around the world. I've never been to another place outside the US around Christmas time, so I'm not sure exactly what other world traditions are, but in the United States, the sound of Christmas bells, or jingle bells, signifies Santa and his reindeer. You know, that's the sound that Santa makes when he's coming. I don't know why he makes that sound, but he does. And so the sound of jingle bells makes any music, doesn't matter what it is, sound Christmassy. You could take a rock song and put jingle bells to it, and all of a sudden it's Jingle Bell Rock or whatever it is. It's a Christmassy version of that song. So that's one thing, but that's kind of a one-dimensional approach to making a track Christmassy. There are a few other ideas that I think kind of make your brain get in that Christmas mode, and those are using traditional instruments. So if we're talking about an orchestra, we're going to have the standard fare of stuff here. We're going to have strings, we're going to have brass, definitely woodwinds, percussion. Those are kind of, your main groups there. Those are the main four sections in the orchestra. So those are a given. There are a few other things, though, that I think kind of help to make it sound Christmassy. Things like the celeste. So the sound of a celeste to me just has this dreamlike sound, and it makes sense because a celeste is basically a giant music box. It's kind of this piano-looking device. It's a keyboard which hammers strike these metal plates suspended over wooden resonators, according to the wiki. I've never actually played a celeste in real life. Obviously I'm playing a sample version here. But I think the celeste gives a really Christmassy sound, for one, because it was used in Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy from the Nutcracker, which is usually performed during the Christmas season. So a few other things that I think go to kind of push it in that realm are kind of older period instruments, things like dulcimers, lutes, zithers, harps, those kind of things. So this is an Autoharp. And so kind of oldie stringed instruments, things like harps, dulcimers, and another thing that's a major Christmas giveaway, at least for me, is the use of some kind of choir. So in this piece, I'm using some real basic ooze, and we'll go over all the instruments in a little bit here. But so I think the sound of a choir is something that's kind of subconsciously associated with Christmas, because at least in the United States here, we don't often hear choirs or choruses many times outside of the Christmas season. I mean, one of the things that's part of the Christmas tradition is singing Christmas carols. I can't think of any Halloween carols, and there's only one kind of New Year's Eve song, I think that's sung here in the United States, and no one really sings it because they don't really know all the words. But I think that most people who celebrate the Christmas tradition probably know at least 2 to 3 dozen Christmas carols and Christmas songs. They're traditional. And so the sound of that really gives it a nice Christmas feel. Now, the style of this is a little bit mysterious, a little bit dreamy, and I'll play it down for you, and then we'll talk about it. that was the first little idea that I came up with there. All of these are pretty short because they're kind of along the same lines as you know, you might create if you were doing a Christmas spot. You know, you were creating music for a Christmas ad. So somewhere around the 1 minute to 30-second mark with little short themes that you know, can be used in a shorter ad here. And that's what I did when I created the spots there. I created a real simple theme, and then I just kind of used it in different places and orchestrated it in different ways, and you know, really kind of stretched it out as much as possible. Then I have this other idea here, which is in the same tempo, but has a little bit of a different feel. Check it out. Now the first one here uses Christmas bells. So obviously, you know, it's a Christmas song. But I think the second one definitely has kind of a Christmassy vibe to it because it has that very mysterious kind of choral mode to it. And these are kind of written in the style of what I think a Tim Burton movie has for a score. So, you know, a lot of minor themes. In terms of the instrumentation here, we just have some real basic strings here. A lot of it is being driven by pizzicato strings, and I'm using cinematic strings too here. So a lot of it is being driven with that pizzicato feel. In fact, a lot of the other Christmassy stuff that I've written kind of revolves around pizzicato strings. You know, it doesn't really matter what the idea is, whether it's in 3/4. Another thing though that I think really makes this very delicate, intimate, Christmassy sound is heavy use of woodwinds. And I'm using Berlin woodwinds here. They actually have a new expansion, Berlin Woodwinds Expansion B, that has more expressive soloistic instruments, but this is just the standard fare, and I think it sounds fantastic. I like to use the oboe and especially the bassoon. I think the woodwinds add so much to this. And, you know, in the beginning here, I just have basically the oboe carrying the melody. And, you know, I could have even done something like this here. Just punched it up with a little bit of clarinet here. Something like that there. That might be nice. So most of the work in this piece is being done by the strings and the melodic instruments. Also, the celeste, which is doing this very nice, just kind of roll of the chords here. when we get to this B section here, we hear the choir. Now the choir in this piece is being provided by Sound Iron's Olympus Elements Legato Women, which I've covered in a previous tutorial, but it has this really beautiful ooh and ah sound that you get. It's kind of a stripped down version of their larger choir libraries, but it has this really beautiful ooh and ah vowel for legato. So that's doing a really nice job of carrying that melody there. And then to kind of beef it up a little bit, we have the woodwinds in the middle here, kind of amping up the intensity. And if you see my computer stick every once in a while, it's because it doesn't like to record a screencast in a lossless format and juggle a boatload of samples. And this isn't too many. I think we're running at about close to 9 gigs of samples loaded in memory. And these tracks aren't perfect by any means. I just kind of put them together and left things a little bit more loose than usual. Usually, I'm a little bit neurotic about quantizing and really locking everything up to make it sound very, very tight. This piece is just a little bit more loose, so. Most of the drive here is coming from the bassoons and the clarinets. We have both the bassoons doing this, just kind of pedal tone really. And then we have basically the clarinets doubling what's going on with the voices. And so I think that helps to kind of beef things up. I also have this very high tone here going on in the flute and the oboe. It just kind of crescendos through this line here. And then the flute over here, let me adjust this so you can see what's going on. And then just jumps up an octave. And I think that works nice to kind of add to the tension. Now the strings, in order to kind of amp up the intensity of this B section here, I did some tremolo. And then in the cellos and violas, we have this kind of thing going on. This staccatissimo, very short, just to give it a little bit more pulse and a little bit more movement there. The ensemble is just basically just doing quarter note octaves here, boom, boom, boom. And really, you can think of those as the basses because I didn't kind of overlap things here. And in fact, at the very end of this phrase, I have the bass just coming in to do a nice little 2-measure little crescendo here towards the end, and a very subtle kind of push towards the end here. Overall, this piece is fairly quiet. I believe I am using some limiting to bring it up a few decibels and a bit of compression. But I wanted that real kind of quiet, you know, not real over the top, which is really easy to do when you have a lot of instruments. It can get loud and overbearing quite easily. And then up top here, you can see that I do have some brass, but it's very, very simple. Basically, I'm using a trumpet ensemble and a trumpet solo just to make the section one horn bigger. And because I wanted harmony, I didn't want to double the size of the trumpet ensemble and just have it overpowering with brass there. And then I added the horn ensemble as well. And these are all powered by Cinebrass. You can check that out here. This is kind of my pretty standard orchestral brass template that I use when I'm pulling stuff into a project. And so these bottom guys are just basically doing octaves. And, you know, just a slight crescendo here, just a little bit of movement in the dynamics. You know, I didn't go crazy with the shaping of the dynamics. In fact, this is just basically a crescendo there. Basically, I just wanted it to just poke its head out right at the very end of this B section. I wanted you to hear, oh, hey, there's some brass coming up there. And I think that works pretty well because you don't really hear it until right at the very end. I mean, it's in there, but it doesn't jump out at you and say, hey, the brass is here. And the other thing that really makes that push there, and it also helps the rest of it and is very subtle, is the timpani. You can hear the timpani is basically going throughout this whole thing here. It's very, very subtle. If we lost it, I'm not sure how big of a difference it would make. You know, it adds just a little bit of a percussive punch, but the big thing that it does here in this B section is it gives some really nice downbeats here. And it's definitely in there. It's definitely providing what we need. But the big thing is right at the very end here. Is that crescendo there. And this is Cineperc. The cool thing about this timpani is they sampled it with 3 mallets. There's kind of a soft, a medium, and a hard, which I believe is just a wood mallet. And the wood mallet has a real nice crack as opposed to. And the cool thing about the rolls is they also sampled all the rolls with the 3 mallets as well. And so you can see that the velocity on this hit here is actually, it's pretty low. And this is triggering the softest mallet here. Okay, compare that to if we jump this up to, I think we need to get above 80. This is Cineperc and this is the mapping. So 1 through 70 velocity is soft mallet, 70 through 100 or 71 through 100 is medium, and then 101 to 127 is hard mallet. So if we push this up above 70, now we're in the medium mallet, and listen to how the crescendo changes. So it's a lot more aggressive. And if we push this all the way up, right, that's not going to change the actual volume, that's just changing the articulation. It's really bright. So I wanted to use this lower mallet, this softer mallet, because I still like the sound. Even the softer mallet has enough punch to really push a lot of energy in that crescendo. But to spice it up, I wanted to give a little bit more crack to this downbeat here. This is a hard mallet kind of strike at the beginning. The other kind of percussion elements really help to kind of glue everything together, I think. One of the things that you gotta have is, you know, suspended cymbal roll, right? And piatti, crash cymbal. Also Glockenspiel here, one of my all-time favorite instruments, which sounds pretty similar to a celeste. It's much brighter, it's much thinner sounding. This is basically doing in sixths the melody and a harmony note. In any kind of wintry music, you pretty much have to have tubular bells. You could almost do just pizzicato strings, choir, and tubular bells, and you're all set. Tubular bells, you know, it has that magical sound to it. So another element that really kind of punches up the rhythmic texture of this B section here is the Autoharp and the Dulcimer we went over earlier. And in some of my other compositions, I've used some similar instrumentation to give it that real kind of traditional feel and sound to it. For example, I love the sound of a harpsichord. I have a really great library here. This is from Waves Factory, and it's their W harpsichord. This is a really inexpensive contact library. It's 9.95 euros. So it's very inexpensive, but don't be confused. It's not cheap. And it would probably sound really cool with like a delay or something. Those pedal noises don't sound very good with delay, but you get the idea there. So in other compositions, I've used the harpsichord, and I think that's worked really well. In this composition, I was trying to use some different instruments here. So I have an Autoharp, and this is again by Cinesamples. This is part of their Cinebells collection. The Autoharp is actually really cool. It's kind of a similar sound to like a harpsichord. It's very stringy, very zingy. It definitely sounds like a period instrument, which I think helps to give a piece a more traditional feel. Same thing with the Dulcimer too. So together, these are basically just doing some very light kind of rhythmic stuff here in the middle section. And originally I had these kind of in the beginning, doing kind of those roll-up chords that you hear. Which is nice, but I thought it kind of got a little bit in the way of what the cellist was doing. And so I just thought it got a little bit in the way, but that's another element, you know, that you can kind of use. We can swap that out for the cellist in the beginning here. And it has a very kind of similar feel to this. It's just, to me, it puts my brain in a different time period. It's a little bit more kind of medieval, old worldy, and not necessarily Christmassy, but it has that same kind of traditional feel, which to me associates with Christmas because Christmas is about tradition. So I do bring it in at the end here because the repeat of the A section is a little bit bigger. We have the melody being supported on the flute. So it's the oboe and the flute that are doing the melody. The bells, which are, you know, the quintessential part of this, these are a couple of things. Everything is contact here. This one is a little instrument that I made with some samples that I found, which is why it says Bodie sleigh bells here. And I even made this fancy schmancy little contact wallpaper here. It does have round robin too. I think I built that in. It's got eight round robin, which is pretty cool. And 2 velocity layers, a whole 2. So that's just a real basic kind of jingly thing. Really easy to sample yourself too. And then I have another one here that I found. This is a free one. I'm not really sure who makes it. I got it a while ago. It sounds like tiny sleigh bells. I don't really like those so much because they don't have that real thick, jangly sound. But I do like to layer it in with the bells because I think it does sound nice. It almost sounds like the bells are farther away, you know, those tiny bells. It just gives it a little bit more dimension. And one thing that I like to do a lot to beef up the bells is add some very light tambourine. Because tambourine and bells are, well, they're somewhat similar. I mean, they're both kind of metal janglies. I mean, you can kind of hear the tambourine if you really struggle, but I think it gives it a nice little percussive pop to each one of those little articulations, especially in this section here. You can definitely hear the tambourine more, but that's okay. I think in the mix, that kind of, the head of the tambourine kind of popping in there, it really kind of gets lost, and you just end up with a very thick, kind of jingle-jangly sound, which is what I was going after, you know, because you gotta have the jangles. And I think that pretty much covers it for this first little composition here. We looked at the strings, we looked at the woodwinds, and again, Berlin woodwinds just sounds fantastic. When we check out this other piece in depth more in the second part of this tutorial series, you're gonna hear some very pretty kind of woodwind stuff going on with the Berlin woodwinds there. But thanks so much for checking out this part. In the next part of the series, we're gonna see what's going on in this piece over here, and we're gonna look at some of the ways that I very subtly kind of use these instruments here. There's a lot less going on here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier. Oftentimes it's more of a challenge, but we're gonna talk about that in the next part of this series here, where we check out the second little Christmassy theme. So thanks again for checking out this video. Again, my name is Dave Bodie for Tuts Plus, and we'll see you around.